is over, but budget is around the corner. We all know that. Nilesh Shah, Managing Director and CEO of Envision, joins us now to walk us through what his thoughts on budget are and what he expects from the first budget of the new government. So Nilesh, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. First budget from the old government, or I would say the first budget from the new government, which is Modi 3.0. Could it be a new avatar? Because normally the first budget of a new government is about fixing the short term, mending the medium term, and kickstarting the long term. What do you think could be the playbook for this year's budget?
So, well, it has several kind of implications, and I think it's honestly going to be probably the most important document in recent times, because this budget is probably going to unveil more like the vision for the next 5 years in terms of what direction does India and the Indian economy take. It will surely have several measures which will essentially not just sustain growth but boost growth. We are essentially an economy growing at 7 to 8%, and we need to sustain that growth rate and maybe higher for maybe the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So clearly this budget is going to be keenly watched from a very medium to long-term perspective. And therefore, I clearly think that this budget, in my opinion, will probably unveil several growth boosting measures.
Nilesh, the general feeling in the market is that this year budget could also see a shift of stance, which is that from expenditure to rural and from boosting and from infra schemes which have been the driving factor of India's GDP, it really could tilt towards consumption. And that could be because of politics, that could be because of reality, or this really could be the compulsive nature which could really be at play.
So, Nikunj, generally, I probably think that there's going to be a lot of continuity in terms of both the intent and the policy measures. If we really look at the government, especially over the last term and the previous term, and even before that, so probably over the last 5 to 10 years, the big focus has essentially been on infrastructure and investment-led growth versus consumption-led growth. Clearly, in terms of priority, it's not that the consumption-led growth has not been a focus area, but clearly it has been infrastructure and investment-led growth, and which I think is the right thing to do. And I believe that that will continue to be the focus. But having said that, it's quite possible that we are going to see some amount of focus on policy measures which can boost consumption, but may not be in terms of direct measures, but probably will be through indirect measures, which could be, say, for example, the rural areas. Could essentially the welfare measure or the payouts for farmers be increased, which is currently at the 6,000 rupees? That can be increased. Maybe the coverage of that be made more universal from a rural context. I also think that from an urban context, from a middle class perspective, it's quite possible that the exemption limit on income tax be hiked so that there is more disposable income that is left in the hands of the middle class and on the urban household. So I think, Nikunj, I don't think the focus, the priority is going to change. I still believe this is going to be more an infrastructure and investment oriented budget. Along with that, there would be some focus on social spending and focus to boost essentially the incomes of both rural and urban households.
Also, we are debating and deliberating the budget. What also is important is that should there be a change in the taxation structure. Now, historically, equity has always enjoyed what could be called as a premium preference. So if one really looks at the tax overhang, do you think if there is a change in the tax rate, which is long-term definition is changed or duration is changed or the rate is changed, could that have an impact on the market?
I think in the first place, clearly what the markets would surely not want is a hike in the tax rate. So I think that's something which probably the market is not prepared for. There is, of course, talk around it, but I don't think the market is really prepared for. And if that were to happen, that would surely impact the markets. In terms of increasing the tenor, I don't think that should essentially, there may be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, but I don't think that will have any kind of a lasting impact, which means that if the definition of long term is increased from 1 year to 2 years or 3 years, I'm not sure if that will essentially kind of really make any a durable impact. So I clearly think if tax rates are hiked, I don't think the markets are going to take that positively. But yes, if the duration is increased, I think that's fine. I think the market will take it in its stride.
Do you expect any big bang indications in terms of where the focus could be? For example, manufacturing, PLI. Do you expect any meaningful allocations which could dramatically indicate which way government wants to spend and how the expenditure cycle is leaning?
On the expenditure side, clearly believe that the big focus will continue to be infrastructure. I think that and I wouldn't be surprised if the outlays on infrastructure are further enhanced, which I think would be a huge positive. Number one. Number two, there will be measures to make India's manufacturing more competitive, and that could include the PLI scheme, essentially extension of the PLI scheme to many other sectors. Third, if I'm not mistaken, now basically the tax rates which was lowered for the manufacturing sector a few years ago, and probably that period has now expired. I wouldn't be surprised if that is further extended for another few years to ensure that manufacturing continues to get that boost. So I think these are some of the areas which will continue to receive priority. It will continue to receive focus of the government. I just think that the priorities remain the same. I probably think the allocations will get increased sizably and significantly. And that to me is going to be the big change.
Nilesh, has always market worry about 2 or 3 numbers: fiscal deficit, tax assumption, disinvestment target. So from an hygiene standpoint, what is the importance of these standard numbers?
I think the top priority is going to be the fiscal deficit. That's clearly, I mean, I think one has to give credit to this government in terms of its priority of fiscal discipline and basically the priority to kind of ensure that the fiscal deficit starts to trend down, despite essentially the challenges that we face like COVID. So I think from that higher fiscal deficit which we enjoyed in the year of COVID, from there it has kind of come down, and now it remains committed to essentially the fiscal deficit gliding down. So I clearly believe from a budget point of view, that is going to be the biggest statistic to really watch out for. And that is something which the markets will look forward to. And if essentially the path of fiscal consolidation continues to glide downwards, that's something which essentially could cheer the markets.
Okay. Final question. Historically, we've seen the importance of the budget gets diluted. It's almost like a one-day event and couple of 100 points here or there on the Nifty. But given that this year's budget is the first budget of the new government, do you think in terms of relative importance, this budget will have a very significant impact, at least in the near-term market direction? It could be a swing event.
It can be a swing event, and I clearly believe that this budget is going to be extremely important. Clearly, the first budget of any government's 5-year term clearly is the most important budget. So to that extent, again, I believe that this budget is important. It's going to be important from a couple of perspectives. One is essentially the agenda and the vision for the next 5 years. And the second is that will this budget continue to kind of demonstrate continuity in terms of what it has been doing in the past, in terms of the whole focus on more investment-led growth, and with some support coming from consumption. So these are some of the measures which the market will continue to kind of look out for. So this budget to that extent is going to be extremely important because it's going to unveil the vision for the next 5 years, and two is, will it continue to be on the path of stability and the focus on investment-led growth? I think the market this time is going to be focused on both these factors. So to that extent, this budget has probably an objective or an agenda which is going to be probably twofold kind of an objective, and that's why this budget is going to assume a lot more importance.
Although Nilesh, really appreciate your time. So glad you could join us with your inputs.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.